Hey,
Hey, how are you?
good, good, good. How's it going your way?
It's been better. If you lose me, I'm trying to set it up on another phone because my service has been acting crazy
Got it.
today. But I'm here.
Got it.
That
Got it.
was my delay. Sorry about that.
Yes, all good. All good. I restarted the live, so we have a little bit of extra time, so all good. But
Got you.
thank you guys so much for joining Be Great, Good to Great. We're highlighting people in their careers, telling them about their journey and answering any questions that you guys have. This is a live and interactive session, so please, please, please ask all the questions that you want to Rashad, and then we'll answer, as many as we can get to. So I met Rashad last year in Antigua, um, when we went with
Great
Colin,
trip.
who was
Shout out.
on here. I think last Friday he was here, but yeah, it was great. I met Rashad. They did like this beach fitness workout in the morning, which was super
Mhm.
dope. And then what I also realized is Rashad does a plethora of other things. So I want you, Rashad, just to give a little bit about yourself and what you do now.
Yeah, so I went to Cornell. I graduated in 2012, played football there. I was fortunate to have success, tried to play professionally. So I actually, for 6 months transitioned to try to play professionally. So I decided I wanted to play at the NFL or the CFL. There's arena football, but I just felt like I wanted to play at a higher level. And for me, I gave myself 6 months, and everybody that knows about college student loans, after 6 months, they kind of kick in. So that was my strategic plan. I would go as hard as I could for 6 months, and then from there, I went to work for a private debt and equity firm. I went to work for a firm called FS Investments, and there I was in sales, learning a lot about alternative investments in the process. And along the way, I got to see a lot of the relationships that financial advisors had with their clients. And their clients were, everyday Americans, managers at companies, executives, some CEOs. And as I progressed through my career, got promoted, I got out into the field, and I learned that alternative investments are typically associated with high commissions, and that advisors didn't always tell their clients, the full story. I know what I told them, and I got to see what they told their clients, and I don't think that I should have a right to tell anybody how to run their business. But essentially, what I saw was they were withholding what I felt like was important information. And so that, in conjunction with my younger brother becoming a professional athlete and getting drafted in 2015, made me realize that if everyday Americans are having these challenges, athletes are having the same challenges. And so I wanted to kind of do something about it, but I didn't know what to do. So
Mhm.
fast forward 2 years later, I met a woman, Courtney Altemus, who was in this chat, I'm pretty sure, and she founded Team Altemus in 2016, like November, December. I joined in March of 2017, but essentially our goal is athletes and money, only positive stories, and the nucleus of that is her background on Wall Street for 2 decades and working with billionaires, millionaires, and professional athletes, but recognizing that she had the most positive impact on those professional athletes. She impacted their lives the most. And so that, but wanted to do that, she wanted to save the world one athlete at a time, and she couldn't do that by managing money. She always felt like in order to do it, she had to take a step back. So she ended up
Mhm.
selling her book to her partner, and so she could truly be unbiased. And so that's how Team Ultimus was created. So she went from managing money for these individuals and these athletes to selling her practice, and then coming to do this completely unbiased. In addition to that, I was on the side where I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't want to go out into the field and be a wholesaler, and sell to financial advisors in a particular region. So I was like, well, what can I do? So we kind of met through fitness, and I kind of briefly mentioned that fitness is how I connected with her. And it was a business I started right after school in 2012, but it had grown to, boot camps and things, but it was never a full steam ahead what I wanted to do. But this was something I was very passionate about, athletes, sports, um, basically my background in finance from Cornell. And so me and her got together and started this company back in 2017. So that was kind of where it started. And
Mhm.
what we've done is kind of transitioned from focusing only on professional athletes to collegiate athletes. And we kind of found our sweet spot in between the two, but really trying to figure out where is the best age group to find and connect with these people. Right now, it's on the collegiate level because there's teams, 120 football players. There's just large concentrations of people on college campuses. So that's where we found our sweet spot. But it's changing every day. So we're really just trying to adapt to the environment.
And you said earlier, right, that you kind of fell into your fitness business where you're doing all these boot camps. So I know you like fitness, and I'm guessing that came from like playing sports, right? So was that like, how did that even come about?
So literally, I just knew I wanted to stay in shape, and it was a matter of, I think, one, recognizing that people always contacting me about working out and things to do. And also, having a younger brother, I just naturally, I trained, I stayed in shape for the purpose of um, kind of just being able to keep up with my younger brother, but also for my own health. And
Hmm.
so after college, it was just something we did regularly. It was boot camps on a weekly basis. And then that evolved into just, I worked with a mentor at the time where I would just do boot camps for him because he had a studio. I never got into owning an actual physical studio, but we would do boot camps at the Art Museum Steps in Philadelphia, a
Hmm.
landmark rocky steps. And then I would work with him a few times a week just to just to stay active. And then it has grown now to where I have an app and I actually, provide programs for people that need programs now that they can't go to a gym. They're at home and they need things to do and they want to kind of have accountability. But it all started as just a let's stay active. And then it kind of
Hmm.
continued because my younger brother was a pro athlete and I wanted to keep tapping into the fact that I knew what to do to be a successful football player. And he kind of kept me uh, on my toes and made me, perfect my craft in order to, help train him in the off season.
It's funny you said that too, because yesterday we had someone on that talked about laying the blueprint, right? And I feel like that's one thing that kind of we don't have in African American communities is where like you have the blueprint to success. You can see, okay, what it takes to be a professional athlete, what it takes to be in finance, what it takes to go to a PE firm or somewhere else, right? And I think that's one thing that you talk about, and even now, I'm sure at Team Altemus, that's what you guys do, right? You kind of lay the blueprint and the foundation to make things a lot easier, especially for those collegiate athletes and earlier.
Yeah, and I think that the toughest thing, and we talked about this briefly the other day, is even though you have the blueprint, somebody has to buy into it, right? It's
Hmm.
like I can tell you what you need to do to be successful, but until you either try it yourself or see somebody else that has gone down that path and kind of experienced the success that I speak of, it's not always enough. But that's the starting point, right? And I think that's the thing to understand is when you do your own research and you find out, hey, this blueprint sounds a lot like what Brittany said, what Rashad said. Maybe they're onto something, right? So then you have that trust and you have that faith to go out and take those following steps to kind of impact yourself and go down the correct path that someone has kind of laid out for you. But no, definitely the blueprint is there in a lot of things that we do. We just got to trust it and make the decision on our own to follow through.
How do you think you build trust with people, right? Because when we think about money, right? Especially with our community, it's like, man, I earned every dollar. I worked a million hours. I got this 5,000, 10,000, $15,000. I guess if you're a college athlete, you could have millions of dollars at that point. I'm not sure, but like, how do you build trust with somebody to be like, okay, you don't know me from anybody else, but I know the right people that I can place you with to manage your money. How do you build that trust and rapport with people in such a short amount of time?
So you're referring to the athletes that we connect with?
Hmm.
So I think the most important thing is that we provide transparency. If you ever come to our sessions, the first thing we do is an icebreaker activity. So if we're on a college campus or if we're working with the NCAA, we do an activity where we get people moving, we get people very vulnerable. It involves blindfolds, it involves things that you may be skeptical of at first, but by the end of the activity, you may or may not. We encourage you to work with someone you didn't work with before. So then right off the bat, you're trusting a teammate that you were less trusting of. So in inadvertently, you're going to be more trusting of us because now you've already opened up the door to trust someone you don't have a true relationship with. And then so now we have your full attention because you go through the exercise. We've never had a bad experience during those exercises. So that's kind of how we, off the bat, how we connect with people. And then I think it's about being transparent and listening to people because by one of the activities we do is we show a side-by-side budget. My budget the first year out of school and my younger brother's budget his first year out of school. His budget was a lot higher. He was in the NFL, so a lot higher than mine. But what you see is that we both had strategies, we both had plans, and I think people really step in their seats when we do that because it's like, one, they see that we're trying to be as authentic as possible. And when you show somebody your authentic self, if you are listening to them and you empathize with them. Once you listen, then you can empathize and understand where they're coming from. That's
Hmm.
the ways that we do it. Activities trying to get people active and not kind of just sitting and listening to us as though we're judging them, but we try to get active. Then we show, we provide transparency, and then we listen and try to empathize with them, because it's an ongoing conversation. And unless you truly understand where someone is coming from, you can't move forward. So that's a
That's true.
very important step.
And I know you said, right, I want to get the full scope of what pretty much your company does. So you connect athletes with financial advisors. Is that the main goal of Team Altemus?
So Team Altemus, we do a few things. I would say the main thing is the foundation is education. So whether we're connecting or not connecting, we want to educate you, because before we connect you, we want to educate you so that you can move forward in the process confidently. So we focus on financial education.
Hmm.
From there, we focus on due diligence. So how do you determine who is appropriate for you? And it's something that's as simple as, you might think about a Google search, but there are a lot of public databases that are available to you. When you think about financial advisors, FINRA and BrokerCheck, you can just see if anyone has had disputes with other clients in the past. So those are the basic guidelines that we kind of just, before we do anything like kind of severe, we just do a quick
Hmm.
one introduction with education, try to find the gaps, and then kind of allow you to fill those gaps before you even sit down in front of a financial advisor, because the lingo, can go over your head. So if we kind of give you that foundation, now you're a little bit more comfortable in that meeting. So then we go through due diligence. So let's say you just got drafted last weekend and you had 20 advisors reaching out to you. The process from there is, if you're interested in all 20 advisors and you don't have any regional preferences, you don't have any, other preferences, we can kind of basically distill down, of these 20 advisors, let's say you want 10, then we go through those 10 and we do due diligence on those 10 advisors. And after we go through the due diligence process, we will then set up those meetings and we'll do mock interviews to prepare you for those meetings with those financial advisors.
Got
So it's
it.
essentially education, due diligence, and then for people that are already in their careers, we can kind of do an assessment of their relationship with their advisors. You can call it an audit, but we can all call it pretty much an assessment and ongoing monitoring, just to see if you have a financial advisor, you're coming into your second contract, you're thinking about taking on another financial advisor, or you're thinking about moving away from your old financial advisor. We can basically do an audit where you would provide all of your information. It would basically come with, we're looking for fees, we're looking for where's your money, how diversified are you, what's your portfolio allocation, so things of that nature. We can
Hmm.
also offer you, just to show you that, one, this is everything you have, these are your fees, this is the pretty much the overview of your portfolios right now, and then kind of what your next set of goals are. This is the information you would take to that next meeting with either selecting a new advisor or staying with that same advisor. So just putting everything on the table.
That's great in providing education beforehand, right? Because everyone thinks like, okay, I just find a financial advisor, they're gonna make money for me, right? I look at it 5 years, 10 years down the line. Now I tripled, quadrupled my investment, but that's not always how things work, right? Things aren't that easy. And I think the good thing that I love that you all are providing is that education behind it, because you have to know your investments, even if it's passive, right? You have to understand what's happening with your money. So what do you think is like red flags if you're when you're looking for a financial advisor, or let's say athletes who already have financial advisors? What do you think are red flags that you tell other athletes like to stay away from?
Yeah, I would say the easiest one, or the most obvious one, is rushing you to make decisions, right? So, sending you emails saying, "Hey, sign this before Tuesday. We gotta catch the market. The market's down right now." For example, a lot of advisors that entered the space after 2009 have never seen a downturn in the market. So this past month, starting in March, they may have been doing great, but it's a consequence of, hey, the markets were great. Like, you didn't really have to do much to be a successful advisor up until this point. And
Mhm.
so when you find people rushing you to make decisions and, telling you that you'll miss out on opportunities, I think that's the first indicator, because what I've learned, my business partner is more versed because she's been in that space. She's been around those individuals. I called on them and I kind of got that sense when I was in the business, but it's just, you don't have to rush. Like, it's your money, you're in control. Anybody that's trying to rush you to make a decision is not putting your interest first. And
Mhm.
if you think about, hey, I wanted to get you into an investment that quadrupled overnight, the risk of that investment, as easily as it quadrupled, it could have gone down, 4 times over. So you don't have to rush. And that's, I think, the most obvious thing that you see when you have an advisor that is not taking your best interest into account.
And what about on like the flip side? What are like questions you think you should ask a financial advisor? Like basic questions, right? When you come into a meeting. So I feel like a lot of people don't know how to sound knowledgeable. So if a financial advisor tells them something, they're just like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think some of the best questions are, why do you think I need a financial advisor, right? Like, what are you?
I think you're breaking up, Rashad. No, it's like breaking up a little bit. No, I can't really see you. If you guys can hear Rashad, can you drop like a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you can't hear him? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, no, we can't. Okay. Yeah, let me see. I'm gonna add you back into the live, Rashad. All right. Okay. Sorry guys for technical difficulties. Let's try this again. Rashad. Back in the live. I had you guys turned around, my bad. Let me see. Wait till Rashad joins back in. Oh, there we go. All right, Rashad. Let me see how I can add you back in here. Boom. We're back.
All right. Sorry about that. My bad.
All good. All good.
So I think we were talking about, questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I broke up. Yeah. So I think the simplest question would be, why do you think I need a financial advisor? And I think just starting there, kind of, because you can have your own assumptions about why you need a financial advisor, but I think someone in this profession should be able to easily articulate, hey, why do you think I need you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they can have many reasons, right? And so while you're listening to those reasons, I think one, do those reasons sit well with you? You want to understand why you want to hire this person. And I think the biggest thing to take from that is, after they kind of give you those reasons, where do we start? Because I think the biggest thing is, why do I need a financial advisor? Where do we start? And how are you different than other individuals? Those are 3 questions that I think you should be able to run off to an advisor, and they should be able to ask at any point in their career. Like, whether it's the first day they meet you or the last day they meet you, they should be able to answer those questions. It should be the same. Let's say it's today, let's say it's 10 days from now. And I think the answer will be different for all of them, but what you're listening for is, why do I need a financial advisor? It's kind of the ability to have someone really show you that your interests or your goals and your objectives are important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we start? Do they have a defined process? Is it something that they are clear about? It's client centric. Are they making sure that you are the focus, you are the nucleus of this operation. And then why are you different? And I think the why are you different doesn't have to be anything substantial, but I think it's a fair question of, you know, why am I giving you my money versus someone else?
Mhm.
And I think everyone's reason may be different, but just writing that down, taking notes of that, because I think that key differentiator is something that they probably have worked very hard on. So that's something you can hold them accountable to throughout the relationship. So why do I need you? Where do we start? And I would say three is what's your differentiator? Are three great questions. And again, you want to make sure that they're focused on you and your goals. Two, you want to make sure that they have a clear method and they have a plan, because again, a lot of people have these, I think if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, or get rich quick schemes. But if they have a plan, that's what drives returns over time. That plan, that allocation, asset allocation, that rebalancing. It's not the, hey, I'm going to hop into this investment. I'm going to get into Zoom because the pandemic started. No, it's like, why are you, getting into the tech industry and things of that nature? Like, because of your risk profile. So those three questions are great resources I think people can use and take away.
Grab y'all pen and paper and please write those down, y'all. And I think that also transcends for like anybody who's getting a financial advisor, right? Like not just
No, for sure.
athletes.
For sure. Definitely. That's universal. That's not just athletes. So, why do I need a financial advisor? Where do we start? And what differentiates you from, your peers in the space?
What mentally do you think you have to get like a mentality, right? What mentality you have to be in when you're trying to invest your money? Because everything is not solely about money, right? A lot of it is about getting in the right headspace. And so,
Yeah.
what type of mentality do you think that people have to be in order to go to someone to start to invest their money?
I think the biggest adjustment for anyone, because I personally think like a lot of people are athletes in the way that, you think about athletes make split decisions, right? They make decisions. If I'm watching a play develop, let's say I'm a defensive back in a football game, I'm deciding to jump for the football that the quarterback has thrown. Like, that is a split decision. My success is determined by split decisions. But when you start investing, you're no longer a split decision person. Like, you have to be patient. And I think that's
Mhm.
the toughest thing is now I got to go from doing everything at a moment's notice to transitioning to being very patient and telling you to trust the process. Like, that makes people uncomfortable. Like, we're so used to our success is defined by how fast can we do something, how quickly can this results be. Amazon Prime is how quickly can we get our things. Like, you know what I mean? That we are so used to things happening in an instant, um, that investing, you have to flip that. You have to understand this is a slow process.
Mhm.
If I am diligent about what I'm doing, if I understand these investments, one, you're not going to win every investment. Every investment you make isn't going to win, but over time, your portfolio should do better. Like, basically, if you have the patience just in our lifetime, you should be higher than when you started. So I think that's the major adjustment. Is mentally you have to be able to be comfortable with not seeing fast results, not seeing flashy numbers, not seeing things change in an instant. And it's hard. We are the generation of instant gratification, and we thrive off of just seeing things happen quickly. And
Mhm.
so it's just like you have to kind of take a back, put that in the back, and understand that I am doing this and I'm doing this the right way, but I am patient at the same time. So just patience.
And I think too, right? We don't see a lot of people who are glorifying patience while investing until they see their investment grow, right? Like people will show their investment not when it's only made like 1%, but when it's made like, I don't know, 30%. And they're like, look, I invested 10,000, now I got 25 back. People don't say, okay, I invested 10,000, now I got $10,100, right? People are like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
so I can get
Yeah,
$100, right? So
yeah.
I think that's a part of investing too. People don't share the small wins or the process. They just see the end goal. And I think that's why people think, oh, I need to invest in something that can get rich quick because people show their results and not the journey of the investment.
Hmm. And I think the other thing, it's almost like as much as you believe in something, sometimes you don't want to lead somebody astray, right? So let's say you have a process, you're very confident and you've done your research and you want to do this for your mother, say, or for your sister or your brother. Now you're taking the responsibility of your decisions, your education, your background, and saying, hey, trust me, go through this process. And knowing that it's going to take time, but, trust me along the way. But that's also, I think for me, it was one of those things where I didn't want to do that right away. Like some investments I made, I didn't want to do because I did not experience it yet. Although I had the education, I had the blueprint, but because I hadn't experienced it personally, I wanted to understand, well, let me experience it. And if I fail or if I do something, if something goes wrong, I can justify and say, okay, this is what happened, but this
Mm-hmm.
is why I did what I did. But if it's always success, the success is easy. It's if something goes wrong, how is your family going to look at you? But that's the thing that I think people need to understand. Like the education allows you to make mistakes, but make them understanding that this is why this went wrong. You went into this investment knowing the risk. So if you
Mm-hmm.
don't do the education, then there's resentment. There's, well, you told me to do this. Well, I told you to do this, but I also educated you about what we were doing. So that way
Mm-hmm.
you can't point a finger and it's no hard feelings. We made this educated decision together and we understood the risk and this is why we went forward doing that. That's what I think is needs to be foundational. That's why education is so important, because if you don't start with education, then you just start telling people to do this, do that, and there's no foundation, then you're blaming everyone. And
Right.
one thing I always talk about is like talking about money. It's one of those things where I was reading something earlier today. It said if people were on social media as much as they, um, or if they talked about their money or even reviewed their finances as much as they're on social media, like the world would be fully financially literate. It's just we spend so much time doing so many things that more or less don't matter. Obviously, they matter from the standpoint of their pleasure to us. They provide pleasure to us. They're
Mm-hmm.
comforting to us, but we need to invest that time, that energy, that money, that time into learning about money and just talking about it so that, the foundation will be there.
What advice would you give to people to start those conversations?
I think, the easiest thing to do would be, depending on your peer group, depending on, who you're close with, it's just, hey, I think it's about just talk about saving. Like, hey, I'm trying to do this saving thing. I just started saving. Does anybody have any tips, tricks? Because I think once you have money saved, I think that's when you can really go forward and apply yourself. You can't invest unless you have money saved. And so if you're always overspending, the conversation never really starts. You always feel like you're running in a spinning wheel, right in a wheel, right in a wheel. You're never able to have, your feet grounded and then make those tough decisions. So I would say just start with saving. Like, hey, what do you do to save? Because I think one, if you understand what someone does to save, or if you recognize that, let's say me and you have the same job, and I'm saving $10,000 a year, and you're saving $1,000 a year, then it's like, all right, what am I doing wrong? Not that I'm doing anything wrong. What is Brittany doing that I could be doing? Or, then you start to understand the decisions that she's making on the other side of the equation are impacting her saving. But now you're in a much better way to, one, invest and kind of be more strategic about the money that you set aside. So I think really just start with saving. And then once you start saving, have those conversations with, hey, what are you doing to save? Like, is there anything you do? And I'll admit, I was a person that I save in like whole numbers, which is probably not the best thing, right? Like, if I save, like my goal is to have. At first, it was like, hey, I want to have $1,000 in the bank. Like I wanted to get to those whole numbers, four figures, 5 figures.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the numbers that I wanted to get to. And reality is, you should start somewhere because I think if you save $5 a day for 10 years, I forget that number, but basically you don't realize that if you save $5 a day and you do that for 10 years, you can have over $20,000. But we all think, like we were talking about earlier, we all think about instantly. We want $20,000 saved now,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't take those patient steps to understand the tips and um, things that people do to save over time.
And I think that's what a comment of sacrifice needs to be addressed. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? To that same example of me only saving, let's say, $1,000 a year, you save 10,000, and we make the same salary. I'm sure you made different sacrifices than me, assuming we live in the same place too, right? Let's say we live in the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
city, all cost of living
yep.
is the same. Maybe my spending habits are more. Maybe I like to go out to eat more. Maybe I like to spend money on trips or whatever, right? Like I think that's true. Where that you need to make some sacrifice to save the money that you want, unless you're playing good. I always say offense and defense. Offense is like your income, defense is your expenses, right? Unless you're playing
Mhm.
good offense and you're literally like making so much money, but in this one, like you have to sacrifice in some type of way. And like what you're saying too, right? It doesn't have to be major sacrifice. It could be like maybe don't go out to eat once, right? Maybe you don't
Yeah.
take that one trip, like, and maybe you can save that whole $1,000, right?
Yeah, and I think and when we typically go into these schools, one of our most popular sessions are budgeting sessions. Literally writing down. Don't tell me what you spent on Venmo. Don't tell me what you cash at to your friend, because when you write it down, it becomes real, right? Everyone, you might have a Mint, you might have personal capital, you might have a budgeting app through your bank, but like when you write it down, it becomes real. So when you recognize that, all right, I'm making, let's say most of these college students, well, let's say they're making $1,500 a month, and then they write down on the other side of the equation, they're coming in $500 under, they're tapping into either credit cards, their savings account, whatever the case may be. Once you write it down, then you realize like, wow, I I didn't realize I was spending that much money. Or take for account the pandemic. Like now everybody should know how much money they spent. Like you should have seen a
Mm-hmm.
drastic change in your spending habits. I don't care who you are. Like there's no way you spend exactly the same amount of money when you were able to leave your house every day to the point where you can't go anywhere. Like that's an obvious change. And so it's the perfect time for you to sit down and say, okay, what was I spending my money on? What was important to me when I could go everywhere? Now that you're in the house and you can't go everywhere, I always think about this, like maybe 50 pairs of shoes aren't that important because you can't even wear them. Like they're not adding any value to your life right now. As much as they may make you feel pleasure during, a normal day. Now you say, oh, I probably only need 20 pairs of those shoes. I could have invested, if they're quality, depending on how much those shoes cost, I could have invested this money and I could have had a emergency fund prior to this event. So I think that that's one of those things where the quarantine should have, if it didn't already, should make people understand that what you used to spend money on and what you spend money on now, you should be able to prioritize a lot better. Because after this, I think one of the things I said was, I don't think I'm going to take Uber again for a little while. Like nothing against Uber, but it's like, you got to realize that if every time I get into this type of car, there's a risk for me to catch this virus. It's like, okay, I'm gonna take that off the table. Now I need to reconsider. Now I don't have an Uber budget, but how am I going to get around? So like, basically, what are you changing during this time period, and how is your spending habits going to change? So I think that
And
that's important, and this is something that we can do now.
that's a great advice, I think, for everybody, right? And you can use different programs like mint.com. I know there's other ones too that like grab all your credit cards and all your accounts, and you can like export all your transactions and do kind of like a past history of what you're spending. And I think that's the beginning, right? To if you ever want to invest, like you said, right, you have to save. And before you can save, you have to have a budget. You have to have a
Yeah,
budget and know what you spend on and what are your bare necessities that you need to make every month, and then what do you do with that excess if you have excess.
yeah.
Um,
And then, like for example, like if you have access, then it's like, all right, now let's. I think taking it even a step back, because we've talked about a lot today. Setting goals, like your needs, your short-term wants and your long-term wants, are something that we do very early on. Because if you don't know what you want, it's think about like this: if somebody gave you, $1 million tomorrow, what would you do with it? And if you don't have a plan, it's almost as if you're not ready. Like you don't. I don't want to say you don't deserve it, but it's like you should have that plan now. You should know, hey, these are the things I need, and these are the things I want. Because when things change drastically, or when, let's say, you get a promotion and you get more money, if you just get more money and spend more money, you might as well have the same amount of money. Nothing changes if nothing changes. If you're gonna spend as if have $100,000 and then you get $1 million and you spend the same way, or you don't make adjustments, you got to recognize that these decisions you make, apply them to where you are, what you need, and kind of what you want, so that when that transition, if something changes, you can be ready for that change. You don't get caught off guard. Like when things like the quarantine happen, you're not caught off guard. You understand that this was a luxury on my want side, and I don't need it, so I can kind of disperse of that, or I can cancel these subscriptions because I'm no longer doing these things. So just having a clear understanding of your needs and wants is very helpful in the process.
we also got a comment too by says I think it's Jam Misty. It says was just talking to people our age yesterday who said they would quote unquote worry about saving later closer to 30. I think it's funny when people have that outlook, right? Because we have such a long time horizon, right whenever you're able to invest, right? In your teens, in
Yeah.
your 20s, whenever. So it's like why wait when your money compounds on itself? But I think it's education, like you said, right? It's like if people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it's so funny. I have 8 brothers and 2 sisters. I didn't. So I literally have one of my best friends calls one of my older brothers like the blueprint. Literally, a person that has told me what I need to do um, during kind of my life. Like basically, hey, he gives you the blueprint, so you don't have to I don't really have to make mistakes. Right? I have my brother, and one of the things he told me was, you know, if you can max out your 401k day one. Like that money is going to grow. You can always tap into it if you need it. In the case of emergency, there's going to be a penalty, obviously, but that's what he told me. And skeptically, I didn't do that. I didn't do it because I was like, well, wait, like I think I can grow this money faster. But he was like, that's not the point. He was like, if you can afford to do it because it's like, some of that money is going to be pre-tax and then you can borrow against it at any point later. So it's like, those are the things, like I said, you have to come to terms over time and make decisions for yourself. But when people give you that advice, it's for a reason. It's if I had invested that money at 21, I'm 29 now, that money would have grown. Like it wouldn't have been in my bank account. I wouldn't have had access to it. So it's one of those things where that's the advice that you hear it, but you still need to figure out what can I do or what's appropriate for me, because everybody's advice for you isn't going to be something that we can just all get up and run with. But that's advice that he gave me, and I was fortunate to have because I understand his emphasis was to save now. Compounding interest is something that's going to be your friend over time.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me time to understand that, right? So
And you trusted him, right? Because he's family. And I feel like when he's family, it's like they always have good intention, right? So they're not going to lead you or steer you wrong.
yes, definitely trust him.
We got a comment that says, Rashad, tell him about the Bond birthday thing.
Uh-oh. Is that my brother? Is he talking? Um, so well, I think he bought me and my younger brother bonds either when we were born or every birthday until we were like 10, and we couldn't um, liquidate it until we turned 18. So that
Mm.
was just something that was just his way of, hey, I want you to understand that there's value in investing from birth or at a very young age. And I read something earlier that the habits that we see and kind of emulate when we get older are the things that we were taught or that we saw when we were younger. So it was kind of instilling in me, hey, the power of investing, the power of not accessing money right away and
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to grow. And if you don't touch it, and that I still haven't touched it to this day. I'm 29. I should go see what it's worth right now because it's worth, you know what I mean, like that. But that's the same brother that told me not to max out my 401k and to do those things early on. It's because he knew, he had experienced it. He's 13 years older than me, so he had been where I was.
And I think that's a big thing too, right? It's like a snowball effect. Once you tell one person about it, then like that person gets to tell their family or their mom or their aunt or their kids, and like then it just keeps rolling. And like you said, how that bond was meant for you, you can have now bonds for your siblings or your future kids.
Yes, exactly.
People are spending a lot of knowledge in these comments. Compounding interest can be complex to grasp. Yeah, it is. When you have no foundation investing, business, finance, not an excuse, but definitely want to acknowledge and empathize where people are coming from. That's true.
I'm
And so,
sorry.
oh, you good. One thing yesterday you were talking about, which really resonated with me too, is you said people are going to like spend money until they die, right?
Yep.
And I think that's something where like everyone needs to worry about finance. If your background wasn't in finance, if you didn't do education or you learned about money, you were saying like everybody's going to spend money, so everybody should learn about money, right? Can you kind of touch on that? Because I feel like that's a very important thing that like it's like you hear it and you understand it, but it's not really grasped.
Yeah, I think one, doing this with athletes, one of the things I think we've realized is that sometimes we walk into sessions and they tell us like, Miss Courtney, this is Courtney referring to my business partner, Courtney. Miss Courtney, I don't need a budget. Like, I'm doing good. Like, you know, my what I start with and what I end with is always positive. I don't need a budget. And what you realize is you need to have analogies. You need to have talking points that meets people where they are. And I think the simplest thing that I thought of a couple of months ago was you spend money until you die. Like literally the time you get off your college campus, whether you are, but even when you're on your college campus, we want them to understand like the cost of living. You need to understand that right now, because when you leave college, this college is the last time that you can live like an adult, do everything you want, and kind of take no real accountability. And I say take no real accountability because, like, let's say you have student loans or something, or you have a scholarship, like, you don't understand the impact of that. So I basically would ask the question, anybody in the room, tell me one day that you went without spending money. And so one kid's like, well, I only ate from my meal plan. I basically they would just highlight days where like they didn't go out to eat and things of that nature. And then I would say, hey, did you turn lights on that day? Did you run any water that day? And what my point was is you can't go a day without spending money. You're going to spend money for the rest of your life. And so taking the time to understand your finances is so important. We spend time in math class. I took calculus. I took English. I took so many classes in college. But the fact that I'm going to spend money for the rest of my life just makes you want to realize, like, look, I got to understand this. And if I don't understand this, I need to find help. So I ask questions. Courtney will tell you, I ask a million questions to her. You're going to spend money for the rest of your life. Like, there's nothing other than breathing and eating. Like, there's nothing you do more than spend money. You know what I mean? Like, literally, let's think about it, like, for the next minute. Like, what do you do more than spend money? Like, there is nothing you do more than spend money. Like the days I would try not to spend money, I would have to go get gas for my car. Like, it's like you can't damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Can't get out of it, yeah.
Exactly. The rent you spend over the course, that rent, if you break it down to a day, you're spending, $50, $30, $40, $50, $60 a day. Like, you've already spent that money for that day. So, like, you literally spend money for the rest of your life. So it's like, if that's a thing, if that's something that I can't get away from, let me understand it. And I think that talking about it, and even just having conversations about it, and I'll just mention this, like, even this week, the holy grail of the male group chat, I brought up, I just got a new car and I was talking about car insurance. And it's like, hey guys, what do you spend in car insurance? But it's like, if you can't compare and contrast, if you don't know any better, you won't do better, right? So all these insurance companies, they can charge what they want, because unless you shop around, you're going to pay what they tell you because you have to have car insurance, right? So, that conversation, to me and my peers, we're comfortable. We can talk about that, but that takes time. Like, it's not something I think everybody can go into a group chat and say, hey guys, what do you spend on rent? What do you spend on car insurance? What do you spend on groceries? But we've gotten to a point where we've told each other our goals. We've told each other these things. And so that's what I think you should be able to do. Now, if you and your friend have the same car, the same driving record, and you're with this company and you're spending $250 and they're spending $110, like, why don't you change? Like, you're going to, like, those are the things that when you talk about money, you realize ways to benefit yourself. And we're going to spend money for the rest of our lives. So why not understand it? Why not, use our peers, use the people that we trust around us to, like, get educated about it. And the truth will always find the light. Like, nowadays you can't really, like, as much as I don't want to say that there are no, like, Ponzi schemes or anything, but, like, no one can really go around preaching false things about money, because there's so many fact checkers in the world. There's Google, there's resources, there's podcasts, there's things where if you look for the information, it will show itself. Like, the truth will show itself. So I think that's why talking about it is the first step, because I'm not an expert. I learn as I go. I'm always learning. I would say Courtney is more expert than me because she worked on Wall Street. She did this. She managed money for all these individuals. But I'm just very comfortable with being vulnerable, and I ask a million questions. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I'm doing what I need to do, I think, to kind of go down the right path.
Then I have two-part question to what you said. So, like, one thing is, how do people create that environment or friend group where they can be open, Like, do they have to surround themselves with people who make the same amount of money they do or have the same goals? And then two, what happens if, like, your ego or your pride gets in the way, right? Or you just don't want to ask questions because you're afraid that you'll look dumb or inadequate or inferior to what you think people look at you as already?
I think I would start with, and it's similar to kind of what we started with, what we start our programs with, is like, try to understand your friends better, right? So one thing me and my friends used to do is we used to write goals down, 5 goals for beginning of every quarter, right? And when you get into that habit of one, hey, I want to share something personal with you guys, 5 goals that I have for the quarter. So you would write down the goals. We would check in. I mean, this is a group chat, so we're checking in, we're talking. We kind of know what's going on, but every month we would check in and say, hey, how's it going? You know, where are you on the path of your 5 goals? That goal could have been, it could have been, and just to give you an idea, it could have been getting a new job, getting a car. It could be um, moving or moving apartments or buying a house, whatever the case may be. Those 5 goals, they don't have to be money related, but just 5 goals that are very important to you. You share that with your peers. You check in every month, and then at the end of that 3-month period, you should have some resemblance of, hey, I got 2 out of 5, I got 3 or 5. But essentially, over that time period, you kind of break down that barrier of, hey, I feel comfortable telling these people what I want out of my life, and also but having a better understanding for what's important to them. Because I think that's 2 things that you can kind of achieve from this. One, you're accomplishing the fact that you're telling your personal business to someone that you trust or that you're trying to gain trust with, and then now they gain a better understanding of what's important to you. And if you're in a group, you can list something. Brittany, you list 5 things. I list 5 things. I'm like, damn, her 5 goals are like really good. I didn't even think about that. So now the next time we do our goals, I'm not stealing some of your goals, but I'm adding what you said to me and taking that into consideration. So I think you start with goals because when you understand someone better, you can then kind of add value to them more effectively, or you can look at them differently, because I think you have to meet people where they are. And if you understand what people want and what people are doing in their lives, you can be a little bit more strategic about how that relationship develops. And so that's where I would start. And then from there, you go to the point where the ego is the most significant thing. I literally, I think the way that I kind of counteract when people tell me something, and it may sound silly, ask open-ended questions. Ask why. If somebody does something that you don't understand and they can articulate to you why they're doing it, then that's them. It's rationalizing their head. Then that's okay. Like, and one thing we do when we go to these schools, we don't tell people that you need to be frugal like Rashad was frugal, or like my younger brother used to save his lunch money and bought his first car. Like, we're not telling you not to eat or save your lunch money. We're telling you to have a plan. Like, you don't go haphazardly in the sports world. Like, don't go into life and try to do that, have that same mentality when it comes to your money. So I say that to say is, when people do things, you have to get to a point where you're comfortable to question what people are doing and why. Because somebody may be, doing something that you think is kind of foolish, but if you ask them a question like, hey, why are you doing that? I'm trying to understand, because as much as I like maybe I like that car that you bought or things of that nature, like, I don't think I can afford it. Can you afford it? Or is there something that you're doing differently? You have to be comfortable asking those tough questions. But I think, again, if you have that foundation of getting a better understanding of somebody, and literally you have to be vulnerable. If you insult somebody along the way, I think for them, it's just it's a way for them to basically understand people. And I've read something like this recently. Like, people do 2 things. They seek pleasure and they avoid pain. Like, those are the 2 things we do. And anything in between, we rationalize, right? We want to, like, if we buy something or if we do something, 9 times out of 10, it's because we are trying to seek pleasure. If we don't do something, if we don't want, to go into debt, it's because we're avoiding pain. We don't want to go through that, right? So people are going to rationalize. And if you ask questions and people actually answer you, you're going to accomplish something. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is getting to a point where you can at least ask questions. The ego and everything, I can't answer that. I'm not like I don't know how to like get rid of someone's ego, but I do believe that if you start with a foundation of understanding someone's goals and start with a foundation of better understanding someone, they will be less defensive when you ask them a question, and just seek understanding, seek education. It doesn't have to be an arrogant thing, because again, nobody knows what's going to happen with the markets. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But if we have understanding, if we kind of look into um, what we do know, what we can control, and kind of work from there, then you just make decisions that are more appropriate for you. So that
Ooh,
was a
you just dropped
long-winded
some
answer.
gems.
I mean, it was a long-winded answer, but I hope so.
It was great. And how can people stay connected with you, Rashad? If people want to reach out or get to know more about what you're doing at Altemus, like how can people just stay connected with you? Can they just DM you?
So, I mean, you could DM me. Team Altemus, we actually are redoing our website. We have a landing page currently, but the website is team-altemus.com. So it's team-altemus.com. That's our website. Directly, you can just follow me on Instagram at Rashad Campbell SC. And that's an easy way. Either it's comments or direct messages. And then I'm pretty sure I have my email up there too. So you can just email me on my page.
Okay.
So
And
that's the easiest way.
what drives you, Rashad? What makes you so passionate to help people with their financial state? And especially, I know athletes are doing it with your company, but what drives you or makes you so hungry to do it instead of just doing it yourself and being like, okay, I'm good, my family's good?
Well, I think when I was at my last job, the company that I got, pretty much the only formal company I worked for. I've done internships and everything, but the company that I worked for, literally prior to leaving in 2017, March 2017, we went on like a 3-month journey of like, what do you want to do next, right? And they were like, do you want to create a job? Maybe we can create a job for you. Like I was looking at the marketing department, I was looking at all these options, and I kind of just felt that this was the most appropriate thing. Sports, something I'm very passionate about, working with athletes, understanding them, having my brother who that provides a relatability that I understand, how their contracts work, how things change, how things are um, different than people's perceptions when it comes to money with NFL athletes and so on and so forth. So that kind of knowledge kind of led me to believe that, like, okay, this is something I could really kind of tap into. I could use the relationship with my younger brother to better educate myself and better kind of communicate more thoroughly with other people because I understand firsthand what they're going through or what their situation is. That in conjunction with, you know, having a passion about money and never really, I would never don myself a guru, but I really just don myself as a person that really wants to explore and learn more, and not being afraid to kind of go out there and ask questions and hopefully empowering people to do the same, because that's what it's about, is being able to ask questions, being able to have this foundation of knowledge about something that we do every day. That just over time, that's what it became more about. Is like, I'm competitive. I want to be successful. Sports are competitive. If you think about money, like being a game, like it's a competitive game. Like allowing to help people be more successful and understand money is something that I think is a great thing that I think I'm trying to bring to the world through Team Altemus. But one day, Team Altemus will expand beyond athletes. But I think now, like Courtney and myself, like we get questions all the time from our peers, and so anyone that has a question, feel free. We don't like shut our doors to other individuals because it's a thing that impacts the entire world, like we were saying. Like, so it's not a athlete thing, but my passion was kind of built off of being an athlete, asking questions, the rationalization that money is something is going to impact everyone, and hopefully I can make a difference.
Love that. And I like to end out all lives, Rashad, by having you shout out people who are being great in your life personally, right? People who you see in your everyday inner circle who is excelling or influencing you or holding it down for you. Like, just shout out the people that you know so that other people, I mean, if they're listening too, then they can hear it too, but that people just get in tune, right? Because we know birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah, so I would say people that I want to shout out are Ibrahim Campbell. It's my younger brother. At Ibrahim is his Instagram. He's always been there motivating me. My mother, Carol Campbell, she's always been the motivator for me. Keith Watson and Chris, they are rejuvenating my peers during this time. They're doing a running challenge and trying to get everyone active. Health is still paramount to me, so I think that's very important. I want to shout out Ajay, my girlfriend, because she is important to me and she's helping me be a better person. And quarantine is hard, and so I think that she's holding me down during this time. And then I would say just my friend group, my peers, June, Dorian, Julian, Bing, Chris, Keith, Bernard, Chad. Like, we have these conversations, and we're better because of it. 13 males, male group, and we try to improve ourselves, our situations every day. And so I think they help me, they motivate me, and so that's what I think is important. Just having people that stick by you.
I love that. Thank you so much for being transparent and shouting those people out, talking even about like, what people can do now, right? Like actionable steps that people
Yeah.
can do now to assess, their budget or even approaching a financial advisor. I really appreciate you coming on the live, talking about your journey, how people can stay connected with you. And yeah, thank you so much, Rashad.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry
And
about
so
Sorry about the rough start. I know.
you
I
good.
know.
No, you good. You
He
good.
was like, "This boy is making me look bad." I'm very
No,
sorry.
no, no, not at all. You good.
Okay.
And so I'll save this live and it goes onto YouTube for you to
Okay.
reference after and IGTV.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys too for tuning in.
Bye.